What is DNA? DNA is a nucleic acid that contains the gene instructions and development and function of all living things. All known cellular life and some viruses contain DNA. The main role of DNA is to store it's for all the storage of information. It's basically our ancestry. It's the proteins that form the structure of our body. It plays an important role in keeping us alive. The DNA molecule is a double helix, two long strands twisted. They're twisted all around each other, and in replication, they unwind and they're copied. The molecular evidence that supports the theory of evolution in DNA is homology. Homology's existence is shared ancestry. It's a pair of structures or genes. It's the code used to translate nucleotide sequences into amino acid sequences. This is essentially the same in all organisms. The molecular clock is the average rate of which a species' genome accumulates mutations. It's used to measure the evolutionary divergence and other calculations. Mutation rates differ between species. The human genome accumulates approximately 64 new mutations each generation because of the cell divisions to generate gametes. The gametes is the male or female reproduction cell that contains half the genetic mutation of the organism. When two human gametes meet, you get a zygote, which is a fertilized egg. Whenever organisms reproduce, a portion of their DNA is passed to their offspring. Most of our DNA is found inside an area of the cell called the nucleus. Each DNA molecule is tightly packed into small cells during replication. Our DNA unwinds so it can be copied. Our DNA can be used in different ways. One is with the legal system. For example, our fingerprints was our own stamp. The police department might use our genetic DNA to catch somebody that's guilty of a crime. One might think that our DNA is found easily in our blood, but it's only detected in our white blood cells. So the doctor would have to spin the blood and be able to just dissect the white blood cells away from the red blood cells and use those cells. DNA technology is being used to help diagnose genetic diseases such as sickle cell, Huntington's disease, and cystic fibrosis. DNA lasts in a body for a while. For instance, if a body is exposed to the sun, heat, water, the DNA can still be tested for a few weeks. If a body is buried, like just underground, the DNA will last anywhere from 1 to several thousand years. Our DNA is just in our body. DNA samples to test can be obtained from hair, blood, amniotic fluids, buccal smear, saliva, just to name a few. These tests need to be run by a testing laboratory for just for the best results. Genetic testing is a test that analyzes samples of a person's DNA. They look for specific changes related to different conditions. These tests help diagnose or predict one's development or risk of certain disease. Most of the time, doctors use these genetic tests to diagnose a patient experiencing symptoms. The diagnostic genetic test, they look for specific changes in the DNA, in specific genes that are proven to cause those genes to not work properly and a person's develop a disease. These tests are very reliable. Diagnostic genetic tests can allow doctors to detect hereditary disease even before the symptoms progress into severe levels. And patients, they can teach them how to plan and learn to deal with these conditions. Diagnostic genetic tests of DNA can detect if someone has inherited, for instance, hyperlipidemia. This is a bad cholesterol, very high level cholesterol. The gene that causes this disease is inherited, and the disease is present at birth. So once this person is tested, they can take precautionary measures, learn to deal with this. This is not a disease that is curable, but with some medical treatment, it's manageable. And without treatment, it has resulted in a very early death. So our DNA can tell people a lot about us. And if you are having symptoms or your DNA is tested, you can determine so much about your ancestry and whether or not you are at risk of disease. That is what I've learned our DNA is.